Sana, I started the recording if you'd like to start. You're welcome.
Thank you, Marwa. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. Our session will focus on telling your story in a college application essay, and we'll also have an introduction to New York University Abu Dhabi. We're very thankful for our special guest, Rashad Sultan, who will be presenting to you and answering your questions about our topic for today and about New York University Abu Dhabi. But before we ask our guests to begin the session, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'd like just to give you a quick overview about Education USA. We are a U.S. Department of State network of over 430 advising centers around the world, specifically in 175 countries and territories. We promote U.S. higher education, and we offer free, accurate, and comprehensive and current information about educational institutions in the United States. And so with over 4,000 universities and colleges to choose from, it's really important for you to begin early. As most of you are probably in high school, in the 11th and 12th grade, this is a great time for you to, if you haven't started already as seniors, to look into the possibility of applying to U.S. universities or American universities in the U.S. or even American universities abroad, as you will hear from Rashad about the opportunity to study at New York University Abu Dhabi. In terms of our education advising centers, there are two advising centers in the West Bank and one in Gaza. And our sessions focus on information and guidance on learning about U.S. higher education system and about the U.S. Higher education process, the admissions process, meeting U.S. higher education representatives as we are today, and learning about certain topics, certain requirements related to the admissions process, campus culture, internships, study abroad, a very broad range of topics that we cover during our group sessions, our public sessions, and of course our Zoom virtual sessions, which since the pandemic we have pivoted virtually 100%. We are hopefully moving back towards in-person events, but in previous years, previous to the pandemic, our sessions were in person at universities, at high schools, cultural centers, American spaces, and other locations. And so we look forward to, in the near future, meeting with many of you in person, whether you're joining us from the West Bank. And if you're joining us from Gaza, you are definitely welcome to connect with our advising center and our advisor, Akram Baghdadi, who is working from the Middle East office in Gaza. Now I will turn it over to Marwa, who will give you more information about how to learn about the various resources available to you.
Thank you so much, Sana. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Marwa. As you can see, the Education USA website should probably be one of the first resources you should check out if you'd like to learn more about the U.S. higher education system and the application process. On the Education USA website, you will find different links and websites where you can learn about the different components related to the application requirements and other topics like the 5 steps to U.S. study. And so the 5 steps to U.S. study should be your guide if you would like to start the process. The first step is to research your options. You need to carefully learn about the different U.S. universities and colleges that you can apply to. There are over 4,000 U.S. accredited higher education institutions, and it is very crucial to choose the best fit universities and colleges based on your priorities. The second step is to finance your studies. You need to learn about the total cost of study at an American university or college and understand the different expenses and how are you going to pay for these expenses, and learn more about the funding opportunities that are offered through American colleges and universities. The third step is to complete your application. You need to have a plan before you submit your applications, of course, to US universities and colleges, and you need to prepare yourself for the different requirements like the standardized test or the personal essay, recommendation letters, and other topics as well. The fourth step is to apply for your student visa. As an international student, you need to have a student visa so you can actually travel and enter the United States. There are different steps that you need to go through so you can actually apply and have your student visa with you. The fifth and final step is to prepare for your departure. It is also very important for you to connect with your host institution to finalize any arrangements before you travel to the United States, and as well to finalize any arrangements in your home country. We also have pre-departure orientation session every year to our students who will be traveling to the United States, so we can talk to them more about the topics to be prepared to begin their studies in the US. And so you can find so much information about the 5 steps to US study on the Education USA website. Please stay connected with us. You can email us at ramallah@educationusa.org if you have any additional questions after today's session, or if you would like to schedule an individual consultation. Also, if you would like to learn more about our upcoming events and events happening in the MENA region, please connect with us through our social media platforms and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and also check out our YouTube channel, where we usually upload recordings of different sessions that you can watch whenever you want. And so you can search for Education USA West Bank, and you can find us on these different social media platforms. And now I will hand it over to our guest speaker for today, Rashad Sultan. Rashad.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me, and thanks to Education USA for all the fantastic work that you're doing. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rashad Sultan. I'm an admissions counselor from NYU Abu Dhabi. The topic of today's conversation is going to be the Common App essay. And I think one of the reasons why we're going to focus on the writing component of the application is because, frankly, a lot of students have had concerns about knowing what's the best way to approach this. So let me get started by sharing my screen. All right, is that coming through clearly?
Yes.
Thank you, Marwa. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to get started by focusing on the essay. But first, I'd like to just talk about the essay in context of the application, the Common App. A good way to visualize the role that the essay or the writing in general plays in the application is if you can think of like a 3-part Venn diagram. You have your academics, which are pretty straightforward and ultimately speak for themselves in terms of what your grades are and what the context of your academic choices may be. Extracurricular activities, which you will list, also are quite straightforward. And then the third kind of component of our assessment when we look at the Common Application is going to be broadly defined as personal qualities. And personal qualities in this context are referring to the Common App essay, the college-specific question, which we'll talk about in more detail, and letters of recommendations. And so the biggest struggle that I've seen students having is knowing what's appropriate and not, or what tone the essay should have. What are best practices ultimately in approaching this essay? Because another thing to consider for students such as yourselves who are looking internationally, potentially at many universities, is that the expectations will vary from one sort of cultural or geographic context to another. And so since we're talking about the US higher education system, I'll be talking about best practices in terms of how to approach writing this essay. So a couple of starting points is that the essay plays several roles in our assessment. We're going to learn a lot about who a student is and their fit for an institution through the course of reading their essays. But first and foremost, the essay is a really powerful tool for students to express their English language proficiency. We can talk about this a little bit later on in the presentation, but there are going to be many ways in which a student expresses their English language skills through English language testing, obviously. But if that's not If that's not required, or if you choose not to submit, or whatever the reason, whatever the case may be, your essay will show your communication skills. It's also a way to stand out. For those of you applying to universities or colleges of any sizes, application readers are going to be looking at, thousands of essays. And so this is your opportunity to make an impression upon the person who's ultimately going to decide, or the committee that's going to decide your admissions outcome. Answering the chosen prompt seems like a very obvious thing to state in a workshop, but it's something that is very common, that students get so caught up in trying to make the most out of this opportunity that ultimately they have a preconceived notion of what they want to say, and they don't answer the question. Now, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go through all 7 questions, and we're going to sort of break them down, and I'm going to ask for all of you to participate in the chat box, and I'll ask you some questions about some sample responses, what you think is good or bad, or what could be done better. And the 650 word limit it's your limit, it's not your goal. So there are 2 essays, just to sort of reiterate that the Common App essay has a 650 word limit, and the college specific question is 450 words. But we'll look at all of that in more detail in just a few moments. So the top bullet point here is to tell the reader, the application reader, something new about you that we haven't seen elsewhere. I know I just sort of said that in other words in the previous slide, but I wanted to reemphasize that because going back to that Venn diagram where academics, extracurriculars, and personal qualities are 3 important but separate areas that an application reader can assess, I think one of the most common mistakes students make, if not the most common mistake, is that they submit their transcripts and their testing, their extracurriculars, they get to the essay and they just reiterate everything they've done. My grades are XYZ and I've done these activities. While you can talk about your academics and your extracurriculars, we want to emphasize here that the essay is a unique space in the application, and the best advice I can give you is to make the most out of that space. And again, to show your communication skills. So choosing a topic that resonates with you and deciding on an approach is the best way to succeed in writing a strong essay. So I'm going to go through the 7 prompts now. I'm going to spend some more time on the first 3 or so to sort of demonstrate a few principles, and again, ask you all to participate in the chat box, and then we can sort of move a bit quicker through the rest of the prompts. But I also think it's valuable just to get your eyes on the essay prompts. I understand that we have a fair number of students in grade 11, which is fantastic. Congrats to you all for getting a head start on this process. And for the seniors as well, you can always review these through the Common App, through the application itself. So the first question is, and I'm just going to read through this, but feel free to read through at your own pace. And what I'm going to ask you to do when I get through reading them is we're going to look at these sample responses, which are based on, not exactly, but sort of iterations of responses that we commonly get. And I'll ask you all to sort of identify which response you think is the best and why. All right, so the question is, some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story. Okay, so first response is, I am of X nationality. It means that I speak in this unique way, I have these unique traditions, and I eat these unique foods that I bet you've never heard of. That's response number 1. Response number 2 states, I want to study business. These are the courses I excel in, and I've won these awards. And then response number 3 is, for some, a watch is an accessory, a status symbol, or a practical timekeeper. If you saw my collection of 73 timepieces, you would understand that my passion goes far beyond this. I'm an avid horologist, and those little hands counting the hours, minutes, and seconds open worlds of science, art, and philosophy that fascinate me. So I'm going to pause just for a moment and ask any volunteers to put in the chat. We'll call them response 1, 2, and 3. If you just want to type in the chat which one you think was the best, and I see some responses coming in. The third one, all right. And if you would like, totally optional, you can tell us why you think the third one stood out, or if any of the others stood out and why. Response 3, because it's personal. Absolutely. We talked about how personalizing and being specific, thank you for your responses, is really the first step into making the essay work for you. The level of detail is absolutely critical as well. I'm not seeing anyone talk about prompt 1 or 2, but I did want to address them. I agree with you all. I think response 3 is the strongest, and we'll talk about all of the reasons why in addition to the ones that you've mentioned. So yes, 1 and 2 are absolutely very general. Talking about your nationality, I think is fine if you personalize it and you make it memorable, but by virtue of just statistics, being a part of any nationality is not something unique. And I understand the reason why a lot of students use this. And again, these are kind of based on common responses, is because for international students such as ourselves, and I would count myself along with you all, is that when you're going to an institution, you want to sort of identify yourself in that way or show that you're fit by being a part of that diverse student body, but it's a little bit too general. And then the same thing for the second one, where it talks about your interests and your achievements. And again, these are characteristics that we've already seen earlier in the application. The third one is very specific. It provides a lot of detail. I also think that this does a great job of conveying that the student who wrote this response clearly has a level of comfort in communicating. It just flows, right? And so this is why I'm grateful to have this opportunity to speak with you all, thanks to Education USA, is that you can watch all of the tutorials or read, the ways to succeed, but there is something that's hard to quantify, something that's very difficult to analyze. And I think that this third response sort of expresses that. It just flows as if you're having a conversation with the student. There is one term, which frankly, English is my first language. I had to look up the word horologist, but other than that, the student is speaking with a very genuine tone. The level of specificity and genuine interest, I would say, in this very sort of niche topic is memorable. But more than just standing out for the sake of standing out, I think that it seems genuine, and it seems that the student is really interested in this topic. Now, something that's very subtle here is that for many of us in attendance today in this workshop, I'm assuming that you're looking at US universities that are going to have some level of a liberal arts education or curriculum. And just to recap quickly, US higher education really places a lot of value on the breadth of academic topics that students can take. Yes, you're going to have a major, but let's talk about, let's say, the UK as a place to study, which is a fantastic option. In the UK, students will choose a major, and it's very rare that they get a significant amount of time to study electives or courses outside of their major. In the US, it's very different. You get to study many topics. Maybe 50-60% of your courses are in your major, and the rest are multidisciplinary or electives or writing courses or languages or whatever the case may be. And so this student is talking about looking at a watch, and they think about the philosophical implications of it, the scientific, the principles of science that go into the concept of timekeeping and art and so on and so forth. So it's very subtle, but that last sentence in the response there shows the way the student is thinking. And as someone who reads applications, I'm like, that's a student who's going to really thrive in the academic environment, which is sort of the topic of our discussion today. All right, thank you for your responses. Moving on to prompt number 2, the question reads, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount an incident or time when you faced a challenge, a setback or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from that experience? This is a great question because it provides students many opportunities. Let's look at the 2 responses. The first says, I failed grade 11 math because I had a teacher who didn't know how to teach well. I want to study engineering, and I know I'll do better with a good teacher. The second one says, as I started my final lap in the pool, the entire crowd was cheering, including every other swimmer, all of whom had finished long before me and were grabbing their towels. If I set any records that day, it only could have been for the slowest time. But without my participation, my school could have not even qualified. All right, so a bit disingenuous on my behalf. The first response is not a real response, but is based on, again, sort of common responses we get. The second is a real response, and it's from a former colleague of mine, Anna, who basically the background to the story is that she went to a swim meet where her friends were participating. One of the swimmers was not able to participate. My friend Anna is a great person but an awful swimmer. She jumped in the pool and said, I'll fill that role, and she failed miserably, but she allowed her team to participate, and this is her response. So now that you know the background, let me know what you think. The first one blamed the teacher. Someone saying in the chat, it's a bit judgmental. That's a great observation. And I like your observation because it tells us a characteristic about the student, right? We're not just looking at the facts of the matter or the facts of the story the student is telling. It tells us about the personality of the student who wrote that. The second one is way better. Yes, I agree. Before I get into a little bit more analysis, I'm just going to pause and see if anyone wants to give more thoughts on either response. I think we kind of agree that the second is the stronger one, but let me know, why is the first one problematic and why is the second one strong? Yeah, good response here that the student didn't find a solution. He just sort of blamed his teacher and said he would only improve in that area if he had a good teacher. So that shows like another personality trait. I also think there's some sort of subtle things here to think about in terms of strategy. That's another thing I want to share with you all today, is that when you fill out the Common App, oftentimes you're not necessarily applying to the program, although you may, but you're showing fit for the university and the program. So this is a student who wants to do engineering, a very math intensive program, and they failed math. Not only did they fail math, they failed grade 11 math. I've seen another version of this essay many times that was actually fantastic, but the student failed earlier on and then has, 5, 6, 7 years of improvement to show, and also showcase how they made those improvements. So talking about failing in anything, even if it's academics, isn't necessarily bad. It's the way the student has done it. For the second one, so now that we talked about sort of personality traits, what are the personality traits that we can see about student number 2? We talked about the fact that she's there to support her friends, right? So that's admirable, right? She's not someone who's afraid of taking a chance. That's another characteristic. She has a good sense of humor, in my opinion. She's willing to laugh at herself and doesn't take herself too seriously. So this is a really great response because, in my opinion, it's important for all of us to kind of consider the tone here. So again, this is an essay you're writing to a university to get admitted. And you're not talking about your grades, you're not talking about your awards, you're not talking about anything other than a moment that happened where you actually failed. But in my opinion, it makes me learn a lot about the student. Even if I didn't know the backstory or the person who wrote this essay, I would really admire that person. And I think they're a great fit for a community where we want people who are risk takers and people who are not afraid to take chances. All right, so let's take a look at now prompt number 3. Again, I will ask you to look at both responses and we're going to discuss in more detail. So the question is, reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking and what was the outcome? Just going to check how we're doing on time here. All right. So the first response is, in my culture, a man aims for a good career and a woman should aim for a happy family. I don't think that this is fair. All right. The second response says, growing up, no one even spoke to me about engineering. It didn't seem like an option for a girl. By 10th grade, I had subscribed to 2 magazines, 5 YouTube channels, and my top Google results were how do you make and how to take apart. By 11th grade, I held our school's first Made by Girls meeting and had 20 elementary school girls bring in clocks to deconstruct. This year, our first meeting had 60 girls. All right, so my first question is going to be a bit different. Can anyone identify the similarity between these two responses? They're both saying something. What is it that they're both saying? This is a very subtle point that I'd like to make. because I think it's really important, especially when you are all approaching the essay and thinking about how you're going to fit into a community. Number one. Number two, think about how you're portraying yourself to the people reading your application. So again, response number one, response number two are saying something, and they're both saying similar things. So great responses here in the chat. The first response is that women don't have opportunities like men, and they're both challenging cultural beliefs regarding gender. You're both absolutely correct. And so what are the differences now between response number one and response number two? I'm going to take a little bit longer on this question because I think it's important. So the one connected the issue to herself and made it personal, and the other one was more general. The first one was more general about the community. Yeah, absolutely correct. That's a great observation. Thank you for that. Anything else? So the last response we have here in the chat is absolutely correct, and I'd like to just expand on that for a moment. So we all agreed on a few things, that response 1 and 2 are saying the same thing, that gender should not be a reason for someone to not have an opportunity. Let's just sort of generalize it like that, and more specifically, that women are often sort of not given the same opportunities as men. We all agree on that. Now, any reasonable person would agree with what both people are saying, but how are they saying it? Response number 1 is saying, I have an opinion, which we all coincidentally happen to agree with, but the way they're saying it is, my opinion is correct and yours is wrong, even though they are correct. Her opinion or her stance or his stance is the reasonable one to have, right? The second one, however, if you read it carefully, they don't say anything about their opinion. What they say is, here are some experiences that I've had in my life, and here are some things that I've done. And what all of you in the chat have done without maybe even realizing it is that you were able to read about the person's character and their principles and their ideas about life just by them telling a story about themselves. So not only did they tell a story about themselves, but they tell you their academic interests, right? They're interested in engineering. They tell you that they're a leader in their community. They look out for younger people and they create opportunities for themselves and others. Because when you make an opportunity for someone in your community, you're empowering yourself and you're developing your skills and your experiences and your interests and all of that. So it's an opportunity for the student and others around them. They take the initiative to do that, and they self-direct. So like the previous question, we talked about the student blaming their teacher for not doing well. The student doesn't make any excuses. They say, no one talked to me about engineering, but I love it. So look what I did. I went out, I'm going to go back for a second. I went out and found ways to develop my skills and interests, and I shared this with young people around me. And I created a club, and this club has grown exponentially over time. So going back to the sort of beginning of the conversation here, the second and first student are both saying something that are right, they're righteous in society, but the second one is saying, here's how I'm going to create opportunities, here's how I'm going to sort of make the most out of my circumstances. The first one is saying, I'm right and you're wrong. And when you're in a university, you're going to be in classrooms with people, students and faculty alike, whose opinions are very different from your own. They may even have opinions which you think are completely unacceptable, but that's part of being in an international community like a university or any other institution. And so response number 2 here has done a wonderful job of telling us that this is a fantastic student, but also they're going to do well in overcoming adversity. So I hope it's all right. I spent quite a bit of time on that question because I think it's a really great example for how to approach the essay and how much of an impact it can have on the person reading your application. So we have 4 more responses to talk about. And in this one here, I'm going to ask you if you'd like to participate by sharing some examples of just one sentence, let's say, to start an essay with. But we're going to move relatively quickly through the rest of the essay prompts here. So the question number 4 is reflect on something that someone has done for you that has made you happy or thankful in a surprising way. How has this gratitude affected or motivated you? So totally optional here. If anyone wants to just throw like a sentence of an idea that pops into your head for a way to respond to this, there's no right or wrong answer. I'm happy to sort of just like give some quick feedback, based on sort of the questions that we've looked at before. I'll pause for a moment, and if we don't have any responses, I'll just move on to prompts 5 through 7. That's all right. I get it. It's a lot of pressure to sort of come up with like an outline or a thesis to an essay right on the spot. But this is a good practice. And I would ultimately use this prompt or any of the prompts as an opportunity to say that you shouldn't just choose one prompt. You should choose several and show them to your friends. Work with Education USA counselors if you can, to sort of, and others that you trust in your life, to say, here's 3 essay questions. I was thinking of answering these, and get a sense of whether that kind of puts you in the best light in this context. So question number 5, discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. The 2 responses here very quickly are kind of based again on common responses that we get. The first talks about like some family struggles and talking about the student's mother leaving when they were young and how they had to play a bigger role in the family. And the second one is very common. It talks about sort of this like big change in a student's life, but it's a lot more surface level. In this case, the students talk about getting a driver's license and all the fun they had with that. Which is great. I think something we can all relate to, or for those of you still in high school will relate to soon enough. But really, it's quite surface level. So again, think of the essay as a way to talk about your personality and your character and how you, if appropriate, how you deal with adversity. Describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? So the first one talks about, the first one says, I love to write. When I need to take my mind off things, I use a pen and paper and get all my feelings down on that piece of paper. Once I start writing, I lose all track of time and sometimes don't know when to stop. The second one says, the hours pass, days turn to night, and only my mother calling me to dinner breaks the spell I'm under. Without realizing it, I'd spent another afternoon with my needle and thread. The small red and black triangles, diamonds, and squares are not just shapes to me, they are my family history laid out in cloth. I was only 9 when my grandmother taught me the art of embroidery, and as she showed me the stitches and patterns that were unique to our village, my fingers literally itched with excitement to start working. So we didn't put this in just because we're presenting in Palestine today, but you may gather that the second response is related to your wonderful country. But regardless of the content of that, the differences here, well, there's a lot of similarities. They're both talking about being immersed in this activity that they love. But again, the second one is a lot more detailed and specific and really tells a story. And in my opinion, reading it, I felt sort of immersed in just a couple sentences and wanting to know more. Something, again, that gets to that unquantifiable aspect of an essay where the art of storytelling sort of draws the reader in. So while I can't tell you why exactly this second response is sort of more interesting or enthralling or whatever the appropriate adjective is, I just feel that it is. So moving on now to number 7, in my opinion, the type of response that has the most potential for success or not so much success. So the response, or the prompt rather, is share an essay of any topic of your choice. It can be one you've already written, one that responds to a different prompt, or one of your own design. So basically write whatever you want, right? How terrifying. So the other questions give you an opportunity sort of to choose a theme and respond to it specifically, whereas this one is very open-ended. Now, of course, this is a fantastic opportunity. If there's something you've been working on or something you'd like to develop that isn't expressed in the other 6 questions, great, go for it. Some tips on what to avoid is an essay you wrote for school and you're going to use it again because you can't be bothered. Maybe it'll work out for you, but in my opinion, try to write something specific for the Common App. If you need to repurpose something, that may also work. But think about all of the tips we talked about earlier. You want to stand out. You wanted to tell a story about you, who you are, and why you're a good fit for the community or communities that you're applying to be a part of. And you want to express your English language skills. So an academic paper, your accomplishments, any activities that you've taken part in, or the university that you're applying to, how you may see yourself as a part of that community. All of those are great starting points. All right, so those are the 7 Common App essay prompts. We're just going to spend a moment here talking about the actually, I'm going to pause because I see something in the chat. Let me just take a look. I know you probably received hundreds of applications. So the question is basically asking how much time do we spend or how do we approach reading the essay? Everyone's different, of course, but generally speaking, we read the whole essay, we go through it with relative quickness, and then we will return to it and go through more details. So you did mention something here, though, that's very important, and I can relate this to another part of the application. The introduction, the first paragraph, the first sentence is going to make the strongest impression because it's human nature. As far as I know, all languages kind of start at the top and move down. Some move left to right, right to left, but they start at the top and move down, as far as I know. So yes, your first impression, what you write at the start, is really critical. And something else, you didn't ask about this, but I'll mention it here, is formatting is incredibly important. If you write an essay which is 1 paragraph, or God forbid, all caps, it may be the best essay in the world, but I promise you the application reader is going to be in a bad mood when they they look at that, because it's difficult. It's difficult to read, and you're making it more challenging for the application reader to get a sense of who you are, right? So think of formatting. I know in high school and throughout college, you think of formatting as this sort of rigid format, pardon the pun, that is placed upon you. And it doesn't sort of make sense, but think of formatting as a way to sort of break up your ideas into digestible chunks. Or if you're having a conversation, taking a breath or waiting for someone to finish their thought before you interrupt them. That's what formatting is. It's just a way to flow your ideas in a way that's easy to read. The question asks in the chat, do you recommend using quotes in the essay? Why not? I think that quotes can be useful. They can be a starting point, or they can emphasize a point that you'd like to make. Absolutely. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. All right, so I'm going to continue, but thank you all for your engagement in the chat. I'll keep looking at that to see if any other questions come up. And just to give you a quick recap, so I think we're doing all right on time. We're going to spend a couple more minutes here, and then I'm going to shift over to the information session, which will go through relatively quickly about NYU Abu Dhabi, and some tips on the application broadly outside of the essay. So the university-specific question, it's going to vary, and not all universities and colleges require this, but many do. And NYU has a question, which is, I think, why NYU? So we decided to use a sort of broad question, which is, why are you applying to your dream school? And 2 responses are here. The first one is not a real response. It's just an example. And the second is a real response. And the reason I'm pointing that out is, well, I'll tell you in a second. The first response says, I'm applying to dream school because it's ranked #1 and it's the best. Very common type of response, which is, well, we'll get to the issues there in a moment. But the second response is, my high school history teacher taught us about the Cold War by sharing his experience of living in post-Soviet Russia. He taught us about European history by talking about his experience living in Paris. We learned about art history by hearing about museums he had visited in Florence. I was in awe of the way he had learned about the world, and now NYU Abu Dhabi is my chance to do this. I want to learn about Ethiopia through a roommate from Addis Ababa. I want to learn about China through a J-term class in Shanghai. I want to learn about the marine environment while kayaking through the mangroves in Abu Dhabi. So there's a lot to talk about here, but it ties into all of the things we've talked about earlier on. When it comes to why you want to be a part of a community, whether it's for the college-specific question or any of the other moments in your life where you're going through this kind of application process, telling the institution about themselves is, in my opinion, a wasted opportunity. Instead, you want to use this space in the Comment app or elsewhere to show why you're a good fit. And so again, I have to sort of emphasize that you need to not be humble, which sounds odd, but it's true. And you need to redirect it to telling a story about yourself. So the story, this is an essay that was written by a student who was graduated a few years ago. She had never been to Abu Dhabi. And what's fascinating to me is that a few years after submitting this essay, she was admitted to NYU Abu Dhabi, and I actually met her when I was traveling to Shanghai, and there she was in Shanghai. And here she is in her essay, like looking into her own future and saying, this is how I see myself as being a part of your community. So that's just a cool kind of side note. But really what's going on here, if we take out any reference to the UAE or NYU or NYU Abu Dhabi, and you just replace them with other universities or other context, this essay is incredibly powerful. This response is incredibly powerful because what they're doing is saying, my high school teacher told me that the best way to learn about the world is to experience as much of the world as you can. And so when it comes to art, go to where there's art. When it comes to any moment of history, try to experience it in person or through people rather than just reading from books. I'm sort of summarizing what I got from the essay. And so the student is saying, I think that's really powerful. I would love to have a life that gives me those opportunities. And then what she does here, which is really subtle and very strategic, is she looks up the profile of NYU. She visits our social media, our YouTube, our Instagram, all of that, and she learns about where our students are from. Where do they study away? What is the language that they use to describe their study away semesters? Like J-term, I don't know if other universities call it J-term, but that's what we call a 3-week course that happens in January. She learned about the geography of Abu Dhabi and that the marine environment is a big aspect of our city. And so she was very intelligent and genuine in finding out, what are my principles? What are the principles of this institution? How can I show that I'm a good fit? So if this student had written, I want to go to Yale, and that city has these things about it, and that institution has these characteristics that are important to me. If I read the same essay and it wasn't about NYU Abu Dhabi, I would say, wow, this is fantastic. I want that student at NYU Abu Dhabi, because again, it tells a story that's sort of undeniable. So I'm going to end our session on the essay here, and I'm going to transition to another session, which is the information session on NYU. And Marwa and Sana, please let me know if I'm okay on time. I think I have another 15 or so minutes.
Yes, that's
so
true.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to move relatively quickly here. We're going to take a quick look at NYU as a whole, talk about NYU Abu Dhabi specifically, talk about the application process outside of the essay, and then we'll get to any questions that you have. And also, please just continue to use the chat to post your questions. So starting with our conversation about NYU, we have to start in New York, of course. And this image is a great symbol for what NYU in Washington Square Park, as our campus is often referred to, is all about. And so NYU is this university that has no walls. That's sort of a motto that we have, because quite literally NYU is in the heart of Manhattan in New York City, and it's not isolated from the city. In fact, it's right smack in the middle of Manhattan, and also we have a campus in Brooklyn. And so this lack of isolation means that if you're a student at NYU or you're at NYU Abu Dhabi and you're studying away in New York, your experience is going to be enhanced and defined by being in one of the great cities of the world. So this image of Washington Square Park in Manhattan, this is right in the center of NYU's campus. And I use quotations here because the campus is spread throughout the city. So all of the great arts, the hospitals, the leaders of industry and business and science, they're all spread throughout the city of New York, and our students have direct access to them. In the context of U.S. higher education, NYU is sort of an umbrella that has within it 10 colleges. And these colleges have specific programs that are catered towards that college. So for example, the Tisch School of the Arts, the Stern School of Business, Tandon School of Engineering, and so on and so forth. These are all programs that exist at NYU in New York. And we have over 200 majors there. So something I forgot to mention, because I want to talk about sort of the lineage and the history, is that NYU New York has been around since 1831 and has been sort of a leader in terms of international students studying at NYU, and also finding opportunities for students to study away, because ultimately NYU has realized that the world is continuously becoming more interconnected, and so we want our students to be comfortable everywhere and effective everywhere, and in doing so have found opportunities for our students to study away. So we're going to talk about study away in more detail in just a moment here, but we'll talk about NYU Abu Dhabi as the first degree granting campus outside of NYU. And what this means is that if you're a student studying at NYU Abu Dhabi, New York, or Shanghai, you can earn a degree which is equivalent across all three campuses, but you would choose your home campus, and New York, Abu Dhabi, and Shanghai are those home campuses. So Abu Dhabi is the topic of our conversation for the most part, so I'm just going to kind of move past this slide here and introduce NYU Shanghai, which is the newest member of the NYU family. It's been around since 2013 and is very similar in character to NYU Abu Dhabi. So NYU New York, a very long, proud, and successful history since 1831, as I mentioned, with over 20,000 undergraduate students from all over the world. NYU Abu Dhabi and NYU Shanghai are very small in comparison, roughly 1,500 to 2,000 students each. And very diverse student bodies. NYU Shanghai has a very unique demographic setup in the sense that 50% of the students come from all over the world and 50% come from all over China. And this is intentional for students who want to immerse themselves in Chinese culture and history and learn the language. You do not at all need to be fluent in Mandarin or Chinese language in order to apply and be admitted to NYU Shanghai, but you will be guaranteed to be fluent by the time you leave. And that's an incredibly powerful tool to have, considering the role that China plays in the global society, in the global market, and all of these things, and the impact that, or the importance rather, that Chinese culture has in the world. And so a question in the chat is, can you do a semester at China or New York during your study? Absolutely. And so that's what we're going to talk about in just a moment. Sorry, I'm just going to... Sorry, folks, I seem to be missing a slide, but the slide that was supposed to be next is an answer directly to your question about studying away. So just to recap, we have three campuses: New York, Abu Dhabi, and Shanghai. You choose your home campus, you apply, and if you're admitted to whichever campus you're admitted to, you have the opportunity to do study away semesters. Typically, NYU students can do one semester guaranteed, and potentially a second depending on their program, while also having many other opportunities to study away during your 4-year period. We have J-terms, which we talked about earlier, 3-week courses in January, summer internships, research opportunities, so on and so forth. So we have 12 academic centers in addition to our 3 degree granting campuses. So the slide that I was looking for, apologies about that, is a map of these academic centers. And these 12 centers are all over the world. They're in Sub-Saharan Africa, in Accra in Ghana, Buenos Aires, Argentina, a couple in the United States outside of New York. We have LA for the first time. We have Washington, D.C., quite a few in the UK and Europe, Prague, Florence, Paris, London, Sydney, Australia, so on and so forth. So absolutely, studying away for a semester, which is the longest period of time an NYU student would be away from their home campus, is part of our identity. And then many other opportunities to study away or travel for research or internships is absolutely an opportunity that we like to talk about. So I'm going to just pause for a quick moment here and talk again about the application in sort of a broader view. The Common Application allows you to choose the schools, colleges, and campuses of interest. In the context of NYU, you're not going to find NYU Abu Dhabi as one application and Shanghai and New York as separate. No, it's New York University, one application, which is a great opportunity for you to fill out one application to more than one campus if you're interested in doing so, and you list them in order of preference. For NYU Abu Dhabi, or let me be more general. Something to consider is that there's often going to be additional aspects to your application that you want to submit. For example, English language testing, which we talked about, an arts portfolio, which for NYU Abu Dhabi is optional, or for Tisch School of the Arts is required, and other ways to sort of add on value to your application. It's going to vary from one college to the other. For NYU Abu Dhabi, something that we have in addition to the Common App is that finalists are invited to participate in Candidate Weekend, which is this year, it's a virtual opportunity to learn more about our campus. Our deadlines are listed below, something that you can learn more about on our website. But in quick summary, early decision is an optional way to apply to U.S. higher education institutions, which is a binding contract. This is a way to express to the institution, you are my number one choice, but the nature of that contract is that if you're admitted to your early decision university, you have to withdraw your application from all other universities. Whereas, and the benefit there is that it takes a lot less time to know what your admission and financial support decisions are, roughly 6 weeks from the date of deadline for NYU. Regular decision is for students who are not really sure where they want to go. They want to send out all the applications, hopefully, inshallah, get all the acceptances, and then make a decision. The difference in timelines is that April 1st is the notification plan for regular decision. So just be aware of that. For financing your education, this is something that's really important, and I really encourage you to work with Education USA to learn more about this because it's very nuanced. But for NYU Abu Dhabi specifically, it's kind of streamlined. We require students to submit the CSS profile, and you can see the dates there. We do offer all of our students an opportunity to be automatically assessed for merit-based scholarships. But in our campus in Abu Dhabi, the primary source of funding is going to be a need-based grant or a scholarship. And this is going to be individualized to students based on their financial circumstances. Due to the high cost of attendance and us being a not-for-profit institution, we're very fortunate to be able to provide competitive financial support to students regardless of nationality or background. It's really going to look at your financial need, and we'll do our best to help you meet that need. So going back now to our presentation on NYU Abu Dhabi, I just wanted to get into some more details about our institution. As I mentioned earlier, we're very small. We only have about 1,800 students now with a cap of 2,000. The reason we want to stay small like this is to ensure that students always have access. This means small class sizes, roughly 10 to 15 students per class is the average, although many of our classes are smaller. We have the most diverse student body, I think, in the world, with over 150 nationalities represented, and many languages, of course, spoken throughout. And so it's a very unique campus, which you can see the image here in the background. Let me just check the chat. I thought I saw a question. Thank you, Sana, for your question. Yes, early decision 1 and 2 are options. They're exactly the same in terms of the nature of the application. Early decision 2 is simply added to give students more time to apply if they were not ready to do so by the November 1st deadline. Thank you for your question. So we have 25 programs at NYU Abu Dhabi. You can see them listed here. They are in 4 areas: arts and humanities, social sciences, science, technology, and math, and engineering, as well as multidisciplinary programs. NYU, NYU Abu Dhabi, like all of NYU's campuses, is very much a liberal arts institution. And so what this means is that you're undecided in your first year at NYU Abu Dhabi, and you declare your major in your second year. All of our students have the opportunity to explore significant amount of academic opportunities outside of their major, taking electives, the core curriculum, writing classes, studying away, learning languages, etc. So, there's the map I was looking for earlier, out of order, but here it is, just for your quick reference to get a sense of the academic centers that we have, the 12 outside of the 3 degree granting campuses. I'm going to move relatively quickly here. and then we'll get to questions. So just quickly talking about the sort of institutional profile, we are a very active campus, and I don't just mean in terms of sports, which is the images on our screen, although athletics and fitness is a huge part of our culture. Our students are very immersed in creating opportunities for themselves and others, whether it's student clubs, MUN, language classes, community service, research. We have an area of the campus called the Engineering Design Studio, which is completely removed from all of our academic programs, but students have come into this like think tank kind of space, and they've come up with amazing ideas. For example, they've created there was a competition, national competition in Dubai. The winner would receive a million dirhams, or like $300,000, first place winner, to create a drone that would serve a social good. And our students won the first place prize and created a drone that could collect environmental data from very remote parts of the desert. So cut the cost of doing so by a significant margin. And also these students learned so much about the process of coming up with these ideas, and they've gone into work at places like Tesla and ministries of government and so on and so forth. Our campus is a residential campus, meaning that all students are not required, but pretty much everyone lives on campus because you have the opportunity to meet roommates from all over the world. You have your before classes and after classes, internships, student clubs, athletics, and then of course classes and social time and everything. It's a very immersive environment. Speaking of our campus, it's purpose-built, state-of-the-art. All of our laboratories, residential spaces, athletics and fitness spaces, arts spaces, music recording studios, film studios, everything is on campus. And our campus, speaking of which, is that little torch kind of in the center at the top of the image. The island on the left here is the mainland, so to speak, of Abu Dhabi, which is only about 15-20 minute drive away from our campus, which is on Saadiyat Island. And then to the right of the screen, you see Yas Island. That's in the direction of Dubai, which is about an hour or an hour and a half away by car. So an excellent opportunity for students to be accessing Dubai for all of the great things that go on there. Our Career Development Center is absolutely fantastic and world-class. So rather than just like throw statistics at you, I would just sort of wrap up our presentation here by saying that for all of the students that are in attendance today, please hold universities accountable by getting a sense of what it is that they're going to provide you in terms of opportunities. So you can look at rankings, which are great. You can look at all sorts of indicators, but in my opinion, the greatest indication of whether you're going to thrive in a community is what are the students doing while they're at university. And you can look at internships and other developmental opportunities, and then what happens to the students once they graduate. So we point at our post-grad opportunities, the Rhodes Scholarship, Fulbright scholarships, other very prestigious scholarships to continue their studies, starting salaries for graduated students, what are the companies or institutions hiring our students, what are the placement rates. Our placement rate is 93%. In this term refers to within 6 months of graduating, how long did it take a student to secure full-time work or continue their studies. Sorry, I was talking super fast there at the end because I just was mindful of time, and I want to see if we have any questions, and I see one in the chat. So the question is, how would you describe or characterize students who study at NY Abu Dhabi? Thank you for the question. They're very different. Of course, we have, like I said, over 110, 150 nationalities. I think students are interested in taking risks and are globally minded and community minded as well, and are very academically curious. So you can have a very specific interest in a major if you want to, or have no idea what you want to study. But that sort of curiosity that we talked about earlier is something that really helps our students thrive in a liberal arts institution at NYU and many of the other colleges that Education USA will sort of put on your radar. Can I do OPT in the US? I apologize, I don't know what OPT is. If you could let me know what that is, maybe I'll be able to answer that. I'll give you a minute to respond if you like.
That's right. That's optional practical training, and that's usually offered by some universities after graduation. Students would apply their last year, and if they're accepted to an internship program, either paid or unpaid, then they can continue on that program for a year and up to, I think, 2 or 3 years if they're in the STEM field.
Great, thank you, Sana. I appreciate that. So I'm going to stay safe and say that it's not like a built-in feature of our campus, but anecdotally, many of our students that I've heard of have interned at various companies in the US and in Europe or in Dubai. Those are kind of the three that come to mind, and have been hired directly right out of, even in their final year, they've been hired. So no, in terms of the specific way that you've described OPT, but more or less similar opportunities, but not a built-in characteristic of NYU Abu Dhabi. Another question is, most memorable essay that you've read? Wow. That's a tough question. You're putting me on the spot. Typically the ones that talk about students overcoming adversity. There's been a lot of that, unfortunately, the last few years, internationally, just particularly for students in school who are like really trying to stay at the top of their class. But yeah, students who talk about overcoming adversity are always very memorable, for sure. Sorry, that was kind of a general question. I'm struggling to think of a specific example, but one isn't coming to mind. Thank you for your question. So I think I kind of wrapped up right on time. I'm happy to take more questions, but I also want to be mindful of your time. I'll just throw my contact information up on the screen. Again, I'm Rashad. I'm filling in for my colleague Hanan, who usually would be presenting and meeting with our friends in Palestine, but unfortunately wasn't able to make it today. So of course you can reach out to me, and I'll be happy to connect you with Hanan if that's helpful. So I'll just pause if you want to take a screenshot or anything of my contact information, and then I'll stop the share. Thank you so much for your participation. If there's any other questions, do let me know. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to Sana and Marwa.
Thank you, Rashad. And thank you to all those great questions from our audience. So thank you, everyone, on behalf of myself and Marwa. Thank you so much, Rashad, for this very valuable session. And thank you, everyone. And we hope to connect with you in future sessions with Education USA. Thank you.
Thank you.